Welcome back to the eCom Growth Show. I'm your host, Danan Coleman, founder of eCom Triage, co-founder of Catalog Defender, and founder of the forthcoming ecom.events, where you're going to be able to find out everything that's going on around the world in the ecom community for events just for people like you. So on my podcast this time, I have Matthew. He is a community building expert. And we're going to dive into some questions. As you know, I always ask about 5 questions of my guests. I'm the host. I know who I am. Don't judge me. So we're going to ask him questions about community, how to build it, why is it important? But Matthew, if you would please tell us who you are. How did you get to where you are right now, being a community builder, and who the heck are you?
Absolutely. First of all, Dan, it's great to be here, and it's fun to be recording the day after we just wrapped up a big event in Salt Lake City yesterday. So I'm coming in feeling all of those good vibes and all that fatigue. So hopefully there aren't too big of a bag under my eyes here, or most of your are listening instead of watching a video. But anyway, I think for me, I got into community by accident. The fun part is I was starting a bit of an entrepreneur journey. I was leaving a tech company to join a small bootstrap startup. I was the only marketer. And I had a really good friend of mine who was in the same boat. He just left kind of like a pretty stable job to dive into being a solo marketer at another tech startup himself. And we both kind of felt a little bit adrift, right? Like, who do you talk to at your company to bounce ideas off when you're the only marketer and you're working with a bunch of product and devs and salespeople? And so, so we just started a little breakfast meetup with a couple of us. It was 4 or 5 of us. And we ran that for a little while. And suddenly we were doing it at lunch because I thought breakfast was easier, but everybody else wanted to do it at lunch. So lunch we did. And a kind of our early thing was, it was very self-serving. It was like, hey, there's 10 people in a room. Go around the room, you introduce yourself and share your problem you're working on. And if you think about it, like, how many times do you hear how easy it is to build a landing page, but then you start going into that, what software do you use and why, right? Like, so a couple of years ago, there's no real AI to help, help you with solving these types of problems. You're spent Googling things and watching YouTube videos, and maybe it's been updated or not, right? So there's all these things that make finding information really hard. Oh, except if you have a peer right next to you who's worked with 10 different landing pages, or has worked with 5 different CRMs, email, ESP. So all those things is kind of the genesis of how things started. And then people really enjoyed it. Somebody said, a buddy of mine said, you should do a bigger event. This should be a bigger thing. And so I had no idea how to do that at the time. This is 6 or 7 years ago. And I just invited a bunch of people that I thought were all more LinkedIn famous than me, and invited them to be on a panel, and the rest is kind of history.
I love it. Yeah. So as I said earlier, I've got a few questions I want to ask you. I want to start off with arguably the most important question that there is. Why is it important to build a community?
Absolutely. I think, from a really objective or high level view, if you think about every big brand on the planet, there's some version of like some cult or some following or some community around it. And I think for all of us that are building communities, we hear about competitors or other brands that have a Facebook group of 30,000 members, or they've got this or that, right? So it seems really obvious at that point, like, okay, if I have a community, I have pre-built customers and all this stuff for my product. But taking one step to the side of that, like, you're a community builder, and so you understand this very well. It's not always like, hey, I'm just trying to build an audience to sell services for. So like the community I run out here, yes, there are some people in it that could buy consulting services from me. The majority of it, the reason I do that is twofold. One is I think that, a rising tide lifts all boats. So the more that we support, the more that we meet up together, it is beneficial for me. It has been beneficial for my career, the relationships of people around me. But honestly, for me, it's also a little bit of passion or mission driven. As I fell into this and started doing it, I realized that I was really good at it. And then I got a lot of energy out of doing it, as opposed to being like a B2B SaaS marketer, which felt like a constant fight and battle every single day. So part of it for me is like, this is a skill set. This is something I maybe have a gift in. I need to keep doing it. But at the end of the day, like, there's just this funny thing about everyone coming up a lot of people coming up and mentioning how impactful the event was for them, the relationships they made. People are getting better jobs. They're getting better pay. They're finding customers. They're unlocking stuff for their business. And long term, it allows me to sit at the center of all this commerce that's happening And selfishly, it does position me as someone to know and someone to
Mhm,
connect with in Utah and in the
mhm.
e-commerce community. And so I think that's why it is so. So for me, I started out as a selfish one to help myself reason, and then I saw an opportunity to help people and really energized me. And the more it went on, I realized this is a business, and I can actually figure out how to make this my livelihood as well. So I think doing it that way makes sense. It's hard when you're the big company and you're like, okay, how do we throw money at this to get followers or something like that, right? That I think
Yeah.
that's when you end up chasing the wrong goal, at least in the short.
Yeah. I agree with you, and so I too have communities, nothing like what you've built, but only because of the it was for my own conveniences, right? So we discussed this offline about my events thing. That was for me. Like, I need to know what events were going on, who was putting them on, how much do they cost, you know? And, so I built this sheet, and then I told people, "Yeah, I have a list," and then people started going, "Hey, Danon, what's going on? Where are we going?" And then, well, I think it was 2, 3 years ago, I started for Prosper Show, which is in the Amazon space, one of the biggest
Yeah,
events,
right,
was one of the biggest events. Everyone does parties, right? They wanna get all these emails from Prosper. They pay 10, 15, 20, $50,000 for a booth there, but the content and the, trade show floor, they're always separated by floors or many, many, many feet of
right,
distance.
right.
And so they create these parties where they just, "Hey, register to come to the party, register for the to come to the party." And so I created a list of parties, and because I have a network in the space, I've been doing strategic partnerships in the Amazon space for 5 years or so. Because at a network, I know all the people that have newsletters that have that it equates to hundreds of thousands of emails. And I said, "Hey, here's the parties list. Can you help me promote it?" So they promote it. Everyone now knows that these are the parties to go to. Like, this is the list. And so I then became Danon the party guy, you know? And so
Exactly.
people are like, "Hey, Danon, what party are we going to? Hey, where should I go? Where's my time best put?" You know? And nobody knows that I try to go to bed at 11 o'clock, but because on the West Coast, that's 2 a.m. for me, but,
Yeah,
I am known as Dane the party guy now, the guy that doesn't actually party. But, yeah, so that became super valuable, and then that became my own community. But I kind of already had that through years of working with companies and doing content together and stuff like that. So here's what I'd like to know. What steps did you take to build a community?
I think the most important one that I think is just often overlooked is I didn't start out like thinking of where I am today with where we started. So I think sometimes the mistake that a lot of people make when we're trying to build communities is we think about what we want it to be 3 to 5 years from now
Mm,
instead of thinking about what we need right now. And so that's kind of step one is like what can you because it's really what can you execute now well, right? Like so we talked offline about a lot of these other things that we're trying to do.
yeah.
I don't go around telling everybody why they should come because of things I'm doing 6 months or 6 years from now. I tell people what's available right now, right? Like this is what we're doing. This is what's happening later this year. That's pretty much it. And so with community building, that is a mistake I see. Is you think, oh, we're gonna make it so that there's 10,000 people that'll be beta users for these types of things. Da 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 da. Well, if you can't find 5 people that are willing to do that right now, you're not going to get 5,000 or 10,000. So that's the first thing is focusing on what is impactful now or what is needed now. And so for us, that's been different stages and other communities that I've worked with. It's you just have to look at where you are in point of time and what can you do with that and what can you do maybe a little bit better. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is consistency. I don't think people I mean, we've all been through product launches. I think listening, your listeners, we all understand that there are some times when you hang up a shingle and you get 10,000 people through the door, or there's other times where you spend $1 million and nobody comes through the door. So the the trick though with events and community is it's often just about momentum and consistency. So we will have a lunch event where 15 people show up. Then the next month it's 55. And then it's 30 or 40, right? So it's just about the more you show up in the space, the more you give touch points and opportunities for people to talk about you, to share about you, then you start to build like this snowball effect. And so
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing is like if I thought, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, like, nobody showed up to an event, which just happened, or basically nobody, I would have stopped. But I know that it's like, it's not this just one day that we're doing it. We're building
Yeah.
something that takes years to build and stuff. So that's the other piece.
Yeah, got it. Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks. That's really good insight, and I couldn't agree more. Like, consistency is super important. It's just the principles of marketing, right?
It
Be
really
be
is.
there and be where your target audience is, you know? All right, so here's my next question. Why is it important to offer value before you sell anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think as human beings, and I almost said in the age of AI, which is starting to turn into like a maybe something everybody's saying. Uh, you know, Authenticity matters.
Yeah.
People care. I think what makes communities powerful is there's an element of trust. If you're at an event and a vendor gets up at lunch to share their solution, and the person sitting next to you, like, is a customer,
Mhm.
like, wow, like that's incredible, because you have a total independent person then can share that. So when we're thinking about community, it's people don't come because of a sales pitch. People come because of the value. And depending on the type of community you build, and how you build those relationships, we try very hard in the community that I own and communities that I work with to position sponsors as partners. And so we control or heavily influence the type of content that they share, and how they do that. And so, for as an example, if somebody is coming and thinking about sponsoring one of our events, and their first questions are just like ROI, like how many deals do we expect to close, that kind of thing, I immediately think this deal's not going to close. Because if you're just judging us on ROI, on immediate ROI, like, we're not like Shop Talk or some of these
Right.
other massive shows where, then again, they're more expensive. If somebody goes, hey, we're looking to connect with people and build relationships, and they say that, I go, oh wow, well, that's our community.
Yeah.
Our community will actually walk around to the booths to ask people what they do, because they're curious, because they know that the people that are there to help. So
Right.
for
Okay.
us, that's part of like the ethos of our community now, is that like people show up to give value. We look for speakers that give great value. And I think at the end of the day, like, I always think it's funny when I say an amazing ad buyer is going to speak, and they ask, well, can I pitch my services a little bit? And I said, well, you better. Like, if you go through 30 minutes of your playbook and giving all this value, and you don't share a little bit of like how you help brands and stuff, like, you're missing out. And
Yeah.
our audience, I think everybody's adult enough to know that, like, you wouldn't be getting a free lunch or be in this swanky hotel without at least hearing 5 minutes of a pitch. It's not
Sure.
like you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but there are ways to do that that feel value driven. And so
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
timeshare. Like, "Hey,
yeah.
we'll give you 3 nights for free, but you have to sit in a 2-hour session."
Right. Yeah, that, which is the worst, right? And so it's a lot lighter. And the other thing too is, I just think that the secret for me is, can you help both sides meet a little bit in the middle? And so we'll have our partners or our vendors, I want them to share use cases. It's like, hey, share how other existing clients are winning with your solution. And
Yeah.
you don't need to brag about how, like, but be specific. Like,
Yeah,
hey, if you're
statistical change.
yeah, right. So here's what they were doing. Here's some of the change that we did, and here's the impact and why. And if
Yeah.
you can show that, people are like, "Oh, really interesting." And then the best ones are when it's something that's not necessarily you have to be using your software to use, right? Like, say you're going through like an offer funnel,
Mhm.
and you're a landing page product. You can show value with how landing pages are built, and what strategies are effective, and what your customers are doing to win, as opposed to, here's how we simplify the landing page builder process, right? Like, those are they're so close, and yet so many people fail because you obsess with we're going to show you how we're cool, instead of, this is how people win with us, and the strategies that people are just winning with, period.
Yeah. So I've been in sales for the vast majority of my life. My first sales job, I was 15 years old. I went to I moved to Tennessee alone, right? I did not go with my family. There was this company that what they did was kiosks all over the country. And I got parental consent, signs to go ahead and go. This is something I would never do with my children, but I was
That's
like,
nuts, man.
yeah, but my parents are like, "Yeah, cool. He's fine." So I got a parental, guardian in Tennessee. There was lodging that was produced by this company that I had to pay for, but I had, a guardian there, and I think I had a stipend just to get, like, food and stuff that I had to then pay back. But I started doing sales when I was a kid, and, by the way, what I was selling was magic markers, those color changing markers? So I sold those at the Opry Mills Mall in Tennessee, and so I have long said, and I've trained salespeople and I've run sales teams. I have long said that selling is best done through help because help builds trust. And just like when you get home from a hard day of work, you don't want to arrive with your wife all harried and your children screaming and yelling. Like, nobody wants to come home to a fest and nobody wants to go to a pitch fest, right? So
Right, exactly.
providing help is like, there's two things I hate. I told you I've been to over 100 events, right? I don't want to go to an event and listen to someone go up on stage and tell me how awesome they are. I do not care. You're not awesome to me, right? It's okay to tell you what your accomplishments are and what your background is, but don't go up there and like, let me tell you how important I am. And then the second thing is someone that goes up just to pitch, 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 pitch. You know, help. Help is the way to go. But yes, anyhow, just to my
Absolutely.
own to back you up with my own
Yeah.
experiences and opinions, like, I couldn't agree with more with you on that.
Yeah, I think that's what's so funny is we often like I think that the thing that's come clear to me with my work and some of the other communities that I've helped is there's often a founder or couple of founders, and the community takes on their the good ones take on their personality. And so
Mhm,
for me, I care about giving value, I care about education, I care about creating a safe space where everyone should feel welcome to come in. You're
mhm.
not going to get a bunch of or anything like
Yep.
that. Like, and that's what happens, right? The reason people go around booths is because they're inquisitive, they're curious, they want to learn, and that's what our community is. We want to learn, and so I think that if you can just keep building what is important to you, like the reason you started in the first place, and that's again the difference between why some communities that start with some big end goal in mind are going to fail, as opposed to somebody's like you or I talking about we're trying to solve this problem. There's a lot of communities in very weird niches that I've worked with or talked to where they just started out like I didn't have support for what I needed. And so I started a community of people to do this. And that's the secret is as long as that community feels useful and helpful to you, it's going to be useful and helpful to other people. And then yes, you want to collect feedback and we're iterating and there's all this nuance to this, of course, but at its core, the vision, the mission of what you're doing should feel really, really clear to you and why somebody should come. And that's the thing too, is like our members are like, if they hear somebody talking about, oh, I can't figure out this one thing with sourcing, or I just can't crack TikTok shop. It's like, oh, you're not in Commerce Catalyst? Like, you should be in there. Like, you could just jump in the Slack and somebody will probably be able to help you like today. And that's how we get more and more people in is because of that. People have been helped. They continue to find value because of that. And then they tell other people.
Yeah, awesome. And so would you say that that's a reason that people, would come back? Is that, like, what gives people reason to come back to communities and stay engaged?
Yeah, it does come down to a need, right? Like, I mean, I think interestingly enough, like if somebody was working at an e-commerce company coming to our stuff and then they jump to like the auto industry, they're probably not going to come to our stuff, although maybe if it was
Right.
like a golf or something event, right, that they would. But I do think that it's the thing that I see that happens regularly is communities start to outgrow maybe the initial need of some of those members. And so like say
Mhm,
take Shop Talk for example, which is one of the largest conferences in the retail space, and
mhm.
it exists because there's so many changing trends, there's technologies, there's all these things. the hard part with something like that, it is so large with, 20, 30,000 people that attend and all these sponsors and vendors, is how do you focus on individual experiences at that point? And so
Yeah.
there's can start to be a disconnect between what you're trying to put on as a company versus what individual people need. And so so what will happen as a conference like that grows is it becomes more about like prospecting on software, and big enterprise brands are sending teams there to try to stay on top of trends and stuff. If you're a smaller brand, there's less value in going to Shopify as there is to be a bigger company at this point, which is fine. That works for kind of like the model they've made. And I will say there's still like reasons to go. I don't want to hate. I love Shop Talk, so I don't want it to sound super critical. But as an example, that is what happens. And so for us, like when I think about that is, do I want to build a world destination e-commerce conference? I would love to do that. If that means I create a conference that no one in Utah sees value in attending anymore, I failed. And so that's the balance, is trying to keep that, because I want my local community to be the primary drivers of attendance and ticket. I would love people to come in, and we do have that, but I think that's the main thing, is I want it to be valuable to the people that it's for. And if I start creating value for somebody else, then I think the whole thing will.
Yeah, and look, I love that, because I honestly believe that a significant percentage of the events that are out there have done that. They grew beyond what the original scope and purpose of the event was for, and then some of them sold to corporations whose job it is to make gargantuan amounts of money on events. And so you lose a lot of the soul and purpose of an event or a community in the interest of getting money, right? And in my own case, like I've had my own WhatsApp group for events. Like these are people that go to events. They're in the WhatsApp group and we all chat. Hey, what's going on? Where are you? I'm hungry, like I'm still sleeping. Don't bother me, that sort of stuff. And I have never let anybody ever, including myself, and I have a vested interest in advertising my own company and service there. I've never advertised my own service there, and I've never let anybody do it, because it is just for event talks. And
I love, yeah. Sorry, you finish.
go.
Well, I was going to say, like, I know we were talking about this a little bit offline, but I regularly get asked, especially at the big events, like, hey, are you going to do this in other cities? Because
Yeah.
maybe other cities, say, once you get outside of LA, New York, maybe Miami, there's not necessarily like really strong e-commerce communities. There are events and people doing things, but there's not necessarily like, a destination conference or something like that, or outside of Vegas. And so I get asked that question a lot. And if I was chasing an event business, then I would say, yeah, I'm trying to figure out how to get to Phoenix next. But I'm not. I'm building community that has that uses events as one of the mechanisms for driving value and connection for its members. And so our roadmap looks different. Our roadmap is I'm just thinking about, how can I become more valuable, right? Like if I have all these people that are are great workers and brands and all this stuff, how do I connect them for hiring and job roles? Because that's a huge market that I could potentially monetize for us. But then the other thing is like training. Like you just hired a new director of retention. How about they go through a training seminar on managing this like at scale, or how about a small mastermind group with 5 other directors of retention from brands in Utah that can meet and be in their own WhatsApp group that's not monitored or anything like that. So that's the thing that I think about, is like, how do I drive more value for this community? Because I believe that, and I know it's true, it's unlocking that value unlocks revenue when you have those two things work together. I'll say this as an example. We run a women in ecom group alongside as one of our monthly regular groups that meets, and I do it for 2 reasons. I did it because it's a mission that I care about, is creating a space that's empowering women that are in a different. It's just a different career for them versus for men, just because there's so many men in our space.
Mhm.
But also, that group gets me incredible leads that come to our other stuff. And
Mm.
so, I say this I say this to my team, and I've said it to people that come, like I do this, yes, altruistically is the reason I started, but also selfishly, it's because there are an amazing women that don't know about our community and that they should. and this becomes a way for to introduce them. So in my mind, it's like I just figure out. I just think about, does this add value for people? Yes. Do I think I can monetize this? Yes.
Yeah.
And then it's a no-brainer. If it's
Yeah.
just one, I'll still probably do the value thing. Like we do a female founder pitch competition. That's probably more value than like I'm not getting a ton of money back for doing that or anything like that. It's coming out
Yeah.
of our pocket to pay that, but
Yeah.
it does support our greater ecosystem, and so that we're going to keep doing it. It's important.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. So my wife and I, we've been partnered, well, in many ways, but we've been together 20 years and we've run our own business for 16. And yeah, and so we've been selling on Amazon, selling supplements for 16 years, and she was just doing that. Now, granted, I don't know how this happened, but she kept getting pregnant, and so we now have 3 children. So she was quite busy being mom, and I, for the record, I am a terrible mother. So, she was off doing that stuff. But it's for me, even on this podcast, like, she is unbelievably capable and smart, and but she doesn't have a connection to a community, right? And so every now and again, I'll get a femalepreneur, is that a word? A female entrepreneur on the podcast. I'm like, "Babe, put your hair up. You're coming on the podcast." And I usually give her like 15 minutes warning. But I love having her talk to these other female entrepreneurs because they've accomplished such great things, and I don't think she realizes just really how much she's accomplished and how much she actually handles. And I'm not saying this, well, I'm saying this because I think it's important that most women know that they're very, very capable, and especially if you're a female entrepreneur, like, in many ways, you have a lot more jobs than we as men do, especially if you're a mother, like, you
Well,
know.
this week, my wife and I were juggling. Our babysitter couldn't watch our kid for 2 days because of sickness in her home.
Yeah,
She has a 9 to 5 where she runs HR and legal, so she was juggling that because I was out for 2 days with my conference and kids and a school board thing. So yeah, like my wife does more in a week than maybe I do in a month sometimes. Granted, I say that a little tongue in cheek. I do show up very much in
yeah,
our life and the kids' lives and stuff. I don't rely on my wife to do everything or anything like that, but
yeah,
I do think for me because you bring up something too, like that I think about with that community helps solve, is this feeling of imposter syndrome. Whether you're a woman in e-commerce or you're an entrepreneur or you're doing it on your own, you see these stories of all these people have it figured out, right? Like Groons just had that acquisition, and if you're not on your way to a $1.2 billion exit, maybe you feel like you're a failure because you've been selling supplements for years and haven't cracked that code. The truth is that's what a community helps solve, is like, oh well, I'm struggling with that, or yeah, like one of
yeah,
one of the coolest things I ever saw was this amazing speaker we have out here, and she showed her career trajectory working at like Oracle and all these big companies as
uh-huh,
a slide over time, and then she superimposed it with divorce, kids being born,
wow,
a
yeah,
battle with cancer, and like
yeah,
all these other things, and that just blew me away when you think about. It's so easy to just look at a life trajectory and go like, yeah, this is when I bought my first house. This is when I got a
yep,
big raise. And
yep.
this is when but this is also these horrible or hard things that we're all going through. And so community lets you see that you're not alone in that as well, which I think is really powerful.
Yeah, you know what? That's a really good point. So, once upon a time, I was actually asked to, come speak on my journey in Amazon, and I won't go into the whole details of it, but it started with getting hit by a bus on my motorcycle and almost dying and being broken and in a bedridden, then wheelchair, then cane and stuff like that. That actually is my origin story into Amazon. And I've almost gone bankrupt several times, two times, and my first, like, we were interviewing medical bankruptcy lawyers when we found Amazon, and in 3 months' time, I made $500 profit. It was 63 units sold. I made $500 profit, and we went, "We don't have to file bankruptcy." $500. So,
That is
like,
incredible. Yeah.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
it's super important that when I talk to sellers, like, I tell them, "Yeah, I've been selling supplements for 16 years on Amazon." They're like, "Oh my god." you must be rolling in dough. And like, there have been times, you know, and, but I tell them, listen, it doesn't matter if I'm a 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 figure seller. It does not matter. What matters, number one, is are you profitable? Because you got to make money. But number two is, what do you want to solve? Like, what's your first goal? Don't set your sights on the peak, because you can't just be there. You got to get there. It's a climb. And
Exactly.
so I like to tell people, like, make enough sales to handle your cell phone bill, 50 or $100 a month. Sweet. You've done it. Now set your next goal. And that's a very important point, is setting the next goal. Anyhow, we didn't get into this. We're supposed to
No,
be talking about community. Now we're talking about life goals, but
well, I mean, that's a part of community though, right? It's like this
yes.
conversation, like the fun part of like just the, I mean, obviously the whole conversation, but especially the last few minutes, that would be a conversation we would have at a community event, right? Like those are the connections and stories you want to hear. Especially if I was thinking about getting into Amazon and I heard that story, I'd be thinking, and that advice, like that's like, oh wow, like I just need to think about it that way, is setting small
Yeah.
milestones, and it becomes
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
more manageable.
I think a lot of people don't get into it because they're like, "Oh my god, it doesn't make any money." Well, it's not exactly true. Okay, I've got one last question for you, and this is actually along the lines of what we were just speaking. But what kind of events have you had to fulfill the needs of the community?
Yeah, I've done a lot of different things. So what's interesting, it's funny. I don't think when we talked through this, I was connecting maybe some of the dots of what I'm figuring out on my own side about this, but it's a
Sure.
perfect question because it's, what's funny is most people that go to events, at least at eCom, are on the marketing side, right? Like, yes, there are sourcing and operations conferences, but if you're a marketer, you're going to conferences all the time. You're showing up for local meetups, right? And that's how we started. We were actually initially a marketing group that a year in, I transitioned to an e-commerce group. And so in the past, we've done a lot of stuff, say like TikTok shop or email, like ad strategies, creative. But what I've tried really hard the last 6 months is, and this conference we just had, was add more content for the other pieces of the business: finance,
Awesome. Yeah.
sourcing, tech review, fulfillment, logistics, things like that. They're
Yeah.
huge pieces of the business. And
Yeah.
so for us, like just this year, we did an AI and ecom workshop in addition to our regular meetups. We did a finance workshop. We did a subscription workshop. And then yesterday we had multiple sessions on sourcing, fulfillment, finance. And so for me, we are trying to um, enrich the space with more topics. So for me, Dana, my mission is like, I'm not worried about an individual event growing from 50 to 100 to 150. I would actually be really happy if I had 50 groups of 10 people that were meeting
I'm
up, because
with you.
that's 500 people, right?
Yeah.
It adds up. But if it's individual small groups that get value,
Yeah.
are and because that all rolls up into I think there's a nuance with how you manage that. And so like if we were talking about AI and what I'm building, I'm just building software that can enable that management at scale, where individuals can know about small meetups without feeling like you're getting a newsletter with 20 events every week, kind of thing. Right, which is kind of difficult to somebody to scroll through that all the time to see what works for them. um but that's kind of the trick, I think, is you want to look at what else the community needs, and you take risks, right? Like, and that's why I say sometimes people don't show up for stuff. I did a fulfillment event 2 years ago, maybe this 3 years ago, and I had a killer panel, and there was like 10 people in there, and like one person was like heckling because they were a sponsor of, like, or they were like a vendor of one of the speakers, and I had to finally
Uh,
tell them to shut up. It made me look like an ass, but it was like,
yeah.
and I was putting it on with a friend, and we had 10 people show up, and it was so embarrassing, but it's like, you know what? Like, it was valuable for the people that were there. And that's what we did. I had the CFO of a really large ecom company who came out yesterday. We had their panel in the afternoon, and I kind of warned him and a couple others, like, hey, it's afternoon. People are kind of thinning out. They're going home. So you might not have very many people in the room. And this, again, this is what I love about the people that choose to show up to speak at our event. He says, it doesn't matter. Like, if there's just a couple people that we can help, then it makes it worth it. So
That's awesome. Yeah. It's a perfect
thank
viewpoint.
you. Like,
Yeah.
and the room ended up being actually fairly full, and it was a killer session. But yeah, anyway, that's a very long-winded answer to the question of just, even within a vertical like Amazon, there's so many topics you can cover, and there's so many things you have to be worrying about that
Oh, absolutely.
you
There's
could do a single event on one thing, let alone trying to figure out how you can add content for all of those parts.
Yeah. There could be an event, and to my knowledge, it's never been done, but it's come up in conversation, but an event on the right way to handle your money, you know? Like, don't pay taxes on $1 million when you can use that to invest into stuff and reduce your tax bracket and all these things, like, "Hey, use
Here's the
this
credit
credit
cards
card."
that get the best points. Yeah, you
Yes. Yes. Amex
exactly.
Gold for ads? Oh, shit, now Amazon's taking away
Yep.
your ability to pay for ads with credit cards. Well, there
That's just
goes an extra $100,000 in free money, tax-free money, you know what I mean? So,
right.
anyhow, um, look, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm gonna wrap it up here, but before I do, you and I had spoken beforehand. You said, and you mentioned it on the call, you've got a Slack community, right? Is that a paid community or is that what? Yeah, tell me.
It's free to join.
Oh,
We have about
nice.
13 yeah, we have about 1,300 members in there.
Wow.
It's pretty active. I mean, it's not like startup CPG active where there's 30,000 people posting every single day, but we'll get 5 to 10 questions a week from people, and different people piling on answering stuff, and there's a lot of different experts in there. And it's free to be a member, free to join. Um, and the fun part is, I think when we talk about community, is I'll just say this. I recently been involved in a couple little AI groups that people are trying to run, and I'm not getting enough out of them. So I just created a new Slack channel a couple days ago in our Slack group for AI, and I just
Perfect.
shared some stuff, and then a bunch of people have been posting there. So
Awesome.
that's what kind of makes it fun, is you can just come in and be a part of it, and it doesn't matter where you are. Obviously, if you're in Utah and you're in the Slack, then you hear about events or other goings on. But it's free for anybody anywhere. We do have a lot of people from all over the country and all over the world.
Awesome. All right. Well, for those of you still listening, thank you very much for being here. I will put a link in the description of this video, and it'll also be in the blog and the LinkedIn newsletter. So if you're not subscribed there or watching there, do so. It'll all be there. Matthew, thank you so much for being on the show, my friend, and I look forward to meeting you in person in Utah.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dana.
All right. See you later.